Hello, and welcome to today's educational session on harassment and discrimination, compliance and prevention. Welcome to this educational video. I hope after listening to the video that you will have a better understanding of what classifies itself as discrimination and harassment. Remember, if you ever have questions, to contact your human resource officer for clarification. After today's session, the learner will be able to define and identify harassment, understand the impact of harassment in the workplace, define and identify discrimination, understand the impact of discrimination in the workplace, and describe appropriate corrective measures. What is harassment? Harassment can be defined as any verbal or physical conduct by an employee which harasses, disrupts, or interferes with another's work performance, or which creates an intimidating, offensive, or hostile environment. Harassment is unwelcome conduct that is based on race, color, religion, national origin, age, disability, or genetic information. Please see your employee handbook under the harassment-free environment regarding Celtic's policy regarding harassment. And remember, that can be found on the Celtic information portal under the policy and procedure site under HR. Now let's take a look at sexual harassment. Federally, the EEOC, or Equal Employment Opportunity Council, regulations define sexual harassment as unwanted sexual advances or visual, verbal, or physical conduct of a sexual nature. Our employee handbook states, other sexually harassing or offensive conduct in the workplace, whether committed by supervisors, non-supervisory employees, or non-employees, is prohibited. Such conduct includes sexual flirtations, touching, advances and propositions, verbal abuse of sexual nature, graphic or suggestive comments about an individual's dress or body, the display in the workplace of sexually suggestive objects or pictures, including nude photographs, when the employee's submission to such a conduct is required, either implicitly or explicitly, as condition of employment, when the employee's submission to or rejection of such conduct affect individual employment decisions, when the conduct interferes with an individual's work performance, or when the conduct creates a hostile, intimidating, or offensive work environment. How is sexual harassment identified? It can be identified in many different ways. Let's look at some examples of how it can be identified. One way sexual harassment is identified is by making unwanted or unwelcome sexual advances, by offering employment benefits for sexual favors. It can be also identified by making threatening reprisals after negative response to sexual advances. Visually identified by visual conduct such as leering, making sexual gestures, displaying sexually suggestive objects or pictures. By verbal conduct such as making derogatory comments, sexual advances, slurs, or jokes. By nonverbal conduct, such as using inappropriate or obscene gestures. By physical conduct, such as touching or assaulting someone. And lastly, can be identified simply by treating someone differently based on their gender. What other conduct can be considered sexual harassment? First of all, an employee's submission to such conduct is required either implicitly or explicitly as a condition of employment. Also, could be employee submission to or rejection of such conduct affect individual employment decisions. And lastly, it's conduct that interferes with an individual's work performance. Let's take a look at what Celtic's policy is on harassment. And the thought has always been harassment-free environment. It is the policy of Celtic Healthcare to promote a productive work environment and not tolerate verbal or physical conduct by an employee which harasses, disrupts, or interferes with another's work performance, or which creates an intimidating, offensive, or hostile environment. Please click on the link below where it says click here to review Celtic's harassment-free environmental policy. I would hope you would take some time to read all of our company policies on harassment and discrimination. And what does Celtic expect from their employees on harassment? Well, employees are expected to act in a positive manner and contribute to a productive work environment that is free from harassing or disrupting activity. What is the responsibility of Celtic Healthcare's management team regarding harassment? Well, each supervisor has a responsibility to maintain the workplace free of any form of sexual harassment. Also, no supervisor is to threaten or insinuate, either implicitly or explicitly, that an employee's refusal or willingness to submit to sexual advances will affect the employee's terms or conditions of their employment here at Celtic Healthcare. What are your responsibilities in regards to harassment? If harassment should take place, it is the responsibility of every employee to report the situation to his or her manager or to the division's senior financial, legal, or human resources officer or the head of your division. Does harassment pertain to non-employees? This is sometimes overlooked because an employee feels that harassment can only happen between people within their company. This is not true and happens almost as much as workplace harassment. Sexually harassing or offensive conduct in the workplace, whether committed by supervisors, non-supervisory, or non-employees, is also prohibited. What should you do if you think you're being harassed? Well, if an employee believes that he or she is being subjected to sexual harassment, the employee should directly inform the harasser that the conduct is unwelcome and must stop. If the harassment continues, the employee should personally and immediately notify Human Resources. Every report of harassment will be investigated. Remember, when telling a supervisor, manager, or the human resource officer, everything is confidential. The information will only be discussed to higher ups if the investigation moves that direction. Investigations will be undertaken as prompt, impartial, and confidential a manner as possible. Employees are required to cooperate in such investigations. Once a report of harassment has been made, Celtic prohibits any form of retaliation by an individual against individuals who report unwelcomed conduct or who cooperate in the investigation of such reports. Celtic will take appropriate disciplinary action for any such retaliation, up to and including termination. What is discrimination? Discrimination can be defined any policy or action taken related to recruiting, hiring, promotion, pay, or training practices that result in an unfair disadvantage to either an individual or group of individuals who are considered part of a protected class. The act of discrimination is prohibited by federal law. The first law that prohibits discrimination is Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, as amended. The next federal law that prohibits discrimination is the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. Another law that prohibits discrimination is the Age Discrimination in Employment Act of 1967, as amended. And lastly is the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act of 2008. In the next 4 slides, we will go in more detail of each of these 4 acts. Let's take a look at the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 as amended. This act prohibits discrimination or segregation based on race, color, religion, gender, national origin, and pregnancy in all terms and conditions of employment. This act ended unequal application of voter registration requirements and racial segregation in schools, at the workplace, and by facilities that serve the general public. Title I of the American with Disabilities Act of 1990 prohibits private employers from discriminating against qualified individuals with disabilities in job application procedures, hiring, firing, advancement, compensation, job training, and other terms, conditions, and privileges of employment. The ADEA, or the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, prohibits employment discrimination against persons 40 years of age and older. The GINA, or the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, provides federal protection from genetic discrimination in health insurance and employment. This act prohibits group health plans and other health insurers from denying coverage to a healthy individual or charging that person higher premiums based solely on genetic predisposition to developing a disease in the future. Let's take a look at when an action is considered to be discriminatory or not. Any action towards an employee, including job assignments, changes in pay and termination, can be considered discriminatory if the action was based on one or more of the criteria such as age, race, color, national origin, religion, gender, pregnancy, veteran status, or disability. What is Celtic Healthcare's policy on discrimination? Well, it is the policy of Celtic Healthcare to comply fully with the government regulations in regard to equal employment opportunities. Equal opportunity will be provided to all in every aspect of employment, including but not limited to recruitment, selection, termination, pay, benefits, training, or any other privileges, terms, and conditions of employment. You can click on the link below to review Celtic's Equal Employment Opportunity Policy. Thank you for watching today's educational session and for your compliance with our policies to prevent harassment and discrimination in the workplace. And remember, if you have any questions or concerns regarding harassment and discrimination, please contact your Human Resource Officer. Now please take the time to complete the post-test for this assignment. Thank you.